Well, hello, everybody. It's great to see this crowd here. Looking forward to talking with you from our panel here, the Regional Outlook. And my name is Roxanne Cole. I'm the owner of Roxanne Cole Commercial Real Estate, and I am a MEREDA board member. And I'll be moderating today's discussion, along with working together with my panelists, who are good friends, fellow brokers. First of all, Molly Briggs of Epstein Commercial Real Estate. Next, Brandon Mitchell of Malone Commercial Brokers. And then Kevin Fletcher of KW Realty. So again, looking forward to hearing their thoughts. You can find the bios if you want to spend a little more time reading about these fine folks here. And you'll find those, if you scan the QR code on your program booklet, you'll find them there. And you'll find other information that's being uploaded today already on the site. Our goal today is for the panelists to make presentations about marketplaces they've been asked to speak about. These are places where these folks do business, and they will provide data on that. But because we're a regional outlook, we can't mention every region in the time we have here. So what we thought we'd do is to try to give a little more time to open up and hear from these folks, because as brokers, we walk around the state all the time. We're wandering around and we get taken into areas and we learn a lot of kind of neat stuff. So some of that stuff will come out in our panel discussion. So from there, we'll consider that we'll be sharing some additional thoughts. And that'll just be some quick little quips, if you will. We're going to try to save some time for questions at the end. And there are microphones here. And so what we'll do is, after we do our kind of open free range kind of run around different parts of the state that they can add insight on, what we'll do is I'll call for questions if we have time, and if they've just gone on and on, I'm sorry, but you'll have to catch them somewhere over a cup of coffee later today here and ask your question. So again, you will find things you need on the QR code on your program, and from here I am going to turn this over to Molly.
Thanks, Roxanne. So I'm here giving data and sort of presentation on the greater Bangor market. That's the market that we cover. And that would include Bangor, Brewer, Hamden, Herman. And when I'm talking about vacancy rates for the three markets, that's really where we track our vacancy. We do work in a larger region than that, but that's really sort of the data that we have on our core region that we work in. And really, despite the national trends in commercial real estate and what you hear in the news, the Bangor market has really remained fairly stable over the last year, even over the last 2 years, largely due to our low vacancy rates in a couple of our sectors. The office market is very stable. In fact, it's very tight. The suburban office market right now, our vacancy rates are running around 2 to 2.5%. And a good part of that vacancy vacancy lies in one building that needs to be repositioned. If I were to take that building out of the data, we'd be running at a 1% vacancy, which is nearly impossible to find the right fit of space for office tenants that are looking. Downtown Bangor still has pockets of vacancy, but overall they're only hovering around probably 2 to 3%, which is low for the downtown. Typically, our downtown vacancy rates run a little bit higher than suburban, and small office spaces are almost non-existent. If I need to find a space for somebody that's looking for one office, 300 to 800 square feet, there's very little choices, even in downtown. Moving on to our retail market, our Stillwater, Hogan sort of corridor, not the Bangor, not the mall proper, but the area surrounding the mall, is actually doing very well. We're running about a 2.5% to 3.5% vacancy in that area. And part of that is due to the low vacancy rates in suburban office space. It has pushed a lot of service office users to infill retail space because there's really no suburban space for them to go to. Our neighborhood centers, which would be places like Brewer, Broadway, Union Street, the local strip centers that are, Hannaford anchored, places like that, are running at a vacancy rate of under 2%. And again, we've seen a lot of service office users sort of migrate to that type of sort of retail space because they just can't find anything in a suburban office building. Brewer actually has very little retail service space on the market right now, and we are seeing a new spec development that's going to happen on Wilson Street. That's one of the first spec retail developments we've seen in a few years. And retail the demand sort of ebbs and flows a little bit on that. So no one has actually built any spec space in the last few years because our rates haven't quite justified construction costs yet. Our industrial market is our lowest vacancy rate. That has been holding strong at less than 2% for probably a good part of 3 years. And our low vacancy in the industrial market makes it very challenging to find spaces for users. We have not seen spec space built really in that market yet either, but I think this year that's going to change, and we're going to see some spec spaces come on the market. Oftentimes what's happening is spaces are getting filled before they even hit the market. They're not even making it to LoopNet. We're not even putting up a sign. It's filled before a tenant has even exited the space. And we have seen the industrial market sort of spread beyond Bangor and further out. There's been some development in Brewer. There's been development in Herman, Hamden Business Park. There's been a number of lots that have sold there. So it's pushing our industrial market further outside just because of the lack of availability. That graphic on the left is actually Hamden Business Park. And it's a mix of service users and industrial, but there's been a number of lots sold in there, and they continue to sell. So I think we will see a few spec developments happen, possibly there. In other areas, Ross Express brought land in Brewer. They're developing over there. So the tight market has pushed people to be further outside of the sort of Bangor proper. Overall, our demand exceeds our supply in our markets, but the demand has definitely softened a little bit. And I think that that's part of the lack of inventory. People are staying put because there's not really much in the market. There's not really, it's sort of created a stall because, if you will, people look online and they're like, oh, there's nowhere for us to go. With that being said, though, tenants are renewing earlier. They're renewing longer just to really solidify their position in their current space. Even if it's not quite what meets their needs, they're staying. We have seen a slight uptick in rates, which is good for our market, but the rents still don't justify construction, and they don't really justify spec construction in some cases. But we're hopeful that the rates will continue to creep up. Maybe costs will come down. We'll talk about that later, and it may open up some development. I'll touch on Main Savings Amphitheater sort of later, but this has done great things for our hospitality market in Bangor. So it's a capacity of over 16,000 people and growing. And last year they had their largest season yet with 27 shows. So it's had a really big impact on really our hospitality market as a whole. It keeps our restaurants thriving. It keeps them going. And it really makes Bangor feel vibrant. So we'll talk a little bit more about that maybe later. Now I'm going to hand it over to Brandon. Oh, I don't need to hand that to you. You have your own. You want that?
Thank you.
Click through. I think you got to click through.
One more.
Yep.
Oh, that's a nice one.
There we go.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Brandon Mitchell. I'm a commercial real estate broker with Malone Commercial Brokers in Portland, Maine. Thank you for having me, MEREDA. This is my second time being up here, and I look forward to this event every year, and happy to be a part of it. I'm here today to talk to you guys about York County and the regional outlook. I do a lot of business in York County. I've watched it grow leaps and bounds, and it's been really fun to watch it just kind of explode. Biddeford, Saco, Route 1 corridor. However, 2024, I don't know if this is the right terminology or not, but not awesome. Yeah, really slowed down. High inflation, high construction costs, high interest rates. Couple that with a election year, it just compounded to just a really slow year in commercial real estate. But it wasn't all bad. There was some great stuff that happened in York County in 2024. the Lincoln Hotel in Biddeford opened. It's a gem of a hotel and won a Michelin Key, which is equivalent to a Michelin star for a restaurant. Right down the street, Fish and Whistle in Biddeford. They are James Beard Award semifinalists for Best Emerging Chefs. Further down south in Wells and South Berwick, Lee Franks. They're also James Beard semifinalists for Best Chef in the Northeast. So good stuff going on in York County. And also, deals did happen. Developments happened. Companies, they moved into town. Package was one of them, came from Portland into Saco, into a 55,000 square foot industrial development that Northland Enterprises built that opened up this year. Cloverleaf Development, also on the Route 1 corridor there, opened up 120 new apartments, and as well as Main Coast Storage, 40,000 square foot, 300 plus unit self-storage facility open there. I mean, that's a sign of people moving to your areas when you start to see some of these pop up. So again, I'm not hitting all of them. I'm just trying to hit the highlights here in the sake of time. But also 2024, not a great year, but deals did happen. 2 and 4 Lerner Road in Saco. Mark Fishman bought this self-storage industrial property. Flew right off the shelf, too. Kittery Shopping Center, 24,000 square foot building sold to Core. They're going to do a kind of repositioning of that building as well. 63 Community Drive. GVS North America released this building. It's an 89,000 square foot building seated in Sanford. They make filters for blood transfusion machines and throttle plates for Ford F-150s. It's an awesome company. Glad they're sticking around. I'm a General Motors guy, but that's all right. And probably the biggest deal that went kind of under the radar this whole last year was the Pepperell Mill. Josh Soley, Todd Fennard teamed up 50-50 and bought all the commercial space in the Pepperell Mill in 2024. 464,000 square feet, 10 building, mixed use commercial property. There's 137 tenants in that space alone, and it was a $17.5 million sale. So again, big stuff still going on last year. But this is the fun part where we get to look into next year. So 2025 definitely feels a little better, a little bit more energy. We have some big stuff coming in the pipeline. Again, the Saco Route 1 corridor is on fire, Tracy. And the sports complex, there's a 60,000 square foot sports dome coming down the pike. My kid's excited for that one. 1016 Portland Road, a 63,000 square foot industrial pad, build to suit. That property is also going to feature a solar farm, a 1 megawatt solar farm that should cover most of all of the power requirements for that site as well. Waterfall Drive in Saco, we have 195 new residential units coming there. Didn't make the slide, but there's also an additional 49 house subdivision proposed as well, further down the road in Route 1. And really because of all the housing growth, Saco is building not 1, but 2 elementary schools. And then last but not least, Eagle Drive in Sanford. It's a 7-lot industrial land development that'll be available here shortly, and hopefully to draw some high-quality industrial tenants to that area as well, because that industrial park is just about full. So that is all I have for today. 2025, again, looks brighter, feels better. There's a lot of deals in the pipeline right now. There's some things that I can't tell you about, but hopefully when I'm up here next year, we can go over that then. So thank you very much.
All right. I'm going to try to follow these two. My name's Kevin Fletcher. I'm the co-team leader at Keller Williams Realty in Maine. And I have spent 28 years in the Lewis and Auburn market. Back when I got licensed, there were still MLS books. Some of you probably don't even know what those are. 24. Funky year. It really was a funky year. I don't know, like it was one of those years that you look back at and you're like, oh, okay, there were still some deals that were done, but I don't know if anybody else can agree. It just felt like a grind, and it just felt like a really off year. We look back and said 24 was the year of the multis. So we had 38 deals in that marketplace, over 750,000. 19 of them were multifamilies. And there were a total 148 multifamily sales in Lewis and Auburn last year. So it was still a very vibrant year. I think this, I'm going to get on a little soapbox in a little bit talking about the housing crisis that we're in. But I think this shows indicative of that and the comfort level of investments in residential housing. I'm not going to highlight all these because I'd be up here for another 15, 20 minutes talking about them. But we still had deals done, retail deals, multifamily, office, industrial deals. Those were all closed. The bigger one on the top there, the Auburn Riverwatch, the Hilton Garden Inn, that sold off market. I thought that was a pretty impressive deal that closed. 93,000 square foot industrial sale leaseback sold for $6 million. The 287 Main Street was a medical office building. It was a condo building that sold. Central Maine Medical Center actually was selling a couple of their buildings that they had excess space of, and that went to the Lewiston School Department. So plenty of deals still done, but I think in the year we just kind of felt like nothing was going to get done, and every deal probably felt like a grind. I thought this was really interesting statistic that we do have market rate housing being built in Central Maine. We certainly know in most markets that there are, affordable housing projects being constructed. But 138 Mount Auburn Avenue, those apartments, the 51 units are complete. The other 51 units actually were almost done, but there was a fire there. So you got 100 units there that are market rate, new construction. Same developer for that project has another parcel of land under contract where he's proposing further additional. The Wedgwood 186 Main, the 186 Main is a market rate. The Stetson Road, the 180 units seeking site approval there, that's the same developer of the Mount Auburn Avenue project. The Stable Ridge Apartments in Auburn, those 120 units complete, again, market rate housing. I think it's really interesting when you take a look at the construction costs. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But in Lewis and Auburn, we actually are able to complete, we've got developers completing market rate housing with market rate financing. The Center Street, that also was market rate housing, including some co-working space there. But the affordability becomes the issue. I think this becomes, you used a great term, forward into 25, right? Like, what do we see forward, the projections? I think housing is an opportunity. And I think, housing is an opportunity for investment here in Maine. We're 34, oh my goodness gracious. Maine short 84,000 homes by 2030. And I think that's an astronomical statistic. And from my perspective, we're not going to be able to get out of that with affordable housing projects. We're going to have to figure out a way for smaller developers, mom and pop developers, small construction companies to build on infill lots for 8, 10, 16, 12 units. The average first-time home buyer right now is 38 years old. That's a national statistic, and it's astronomical. Everything continues to keep going up. At some point, we have to figure out this housing crisis and work to try to resolve this. And I think 25 is the year of opportunity for housing. And we're going to talk a little bit more, but I think I'm good there.
Yay. Okay. I'm just going to quickly go through a few things that were sent in to me or people mentioned and I looked into or I just knew about. So here, I was talking with Tom Bartel, Wyndham Economic Development Executive Director, and he said there's a lot going on, and you'll be able to look at this when you have a chance to look at what's online, as I mentioned earlier. He's talking about a huge public infrastructure investment, and he said in about a year that's going to really play out. And they are also seeing on the right-hand side, you're going to see approved and planned private development, which is obviously another thing that is interrelated, which we'll talk more about. Kevin's going to bring that point up about housing and economic development. So that'll be kind of fun to keep your eyes open for. This is kind of an interesting one. This is an update. Andre Rosignol was on this panel last year, and he did Aroostook County. And I called him up and I said, I just wondered, have you got any updates? Love to tell people what might have happened. And he said, oh yeah, he said the gentleman who bought the Presque Isle Mall, he has leased out 13 spaces this year. And I thought that would put a smile on some of your faces. So he's kind of got an interesting way he goes about it. And so you can click on, when you get that online, you can take a look at, there's a great article that talks about how the guy got it done. So that's just kind of a fun thing, and a shout out to Andre for making me aware of that. Beyond that, there's a property in Ogunquit Village that a building stood there for all the way back to the mid-1800s. It was a blacksmith shop, and it was a great antique mall kind of thing. And 2 or 3 years ago, it just caught fire. It burned to the ground, and the owners said, we've got this great parking lot. We can get a lot of income. We know people want to put stuff new here, whatever. And they said, you know what? We want to build our building back. So they're building their building back. They're putting new retail shops in a building that had them, but this is a new construction in a quaint little village, Ogunquit Village, and it's kind of an interesting thing, and they stepped up and said, yep, it's the right thing to do, we're doing it. So that was kind of cool. And the last thing I want to talk to you about, Sanford Mill is a cool development. Northland did this, and it's got a really great story, 100% occupancy in the upper levels of apartments, and it's got an incredibly beautiful commercial space. They're just, as of now, going to focus on that, and that's commercial space for lease, and it's right on the river, so when you go check into that, you'll see a lot of photos on that that will give you a sense of how that's really quite amazing, and that's really helping bring Sanford up. There's a lot going on in these kind of markets in different places. So anyway, with that, I'm going to talk to these folks on your behalf to try to find out what's in their minds here as we go forward. So I'm going to move off from the panel here, and I'm going to hand this right back to Kevin, because I want to ask Kevin to talk to us a little bit more. He has a lot of thoughts about the tightness between the housing and the commercial and what that's all about. He's experiencing it in LA and other places he's doing deals. So he's going to start that, and the other panelists are free to jump in. We're just kind of going off the rails here, guys.
I got one.
You want this? You don't need this.
I don't need that.
Here.
So, yeah, we were on this panel. We're trying to figure out what to chat about in 20, and looking forward. And part of the forecast for 2025 is, we are, let's face it, we're all in this housing crisis or crunch. And, with median home prices going up, rental housing going up, we've got 84,000 homes that at some point we've got to figure out a way to replace that. The average first-time home buyer is 38 years old. I mean, these are not statistics that are viable for a healthy economy from my perspective in the state of Maine. Everything trickles down. If our commercial tenants, if our people renting industrial space or office space, they've got to pay more so that people can have housing, at some point that's going to trickle down into what they can afford to charge or what they have to charge. And I think that we really have to try to work at a state level, and we come out of this, from my perspective, with ingenuity of people like us in this room, figuring out ways to create housing, and we need to work to try to fix and resolve some of the legislative and regulatory issues that we have. I had a simple DEP amendment in the town of Old Orchard Beach that took 2.5 years to move the detention pond on an already approved project. I mean, this is just one example of part of the issues that we have to face. I was looking at building 24 units myself in Lisbon, and ran into an issue with the fire truck being able to egress out of the lot. I'm like, after the fire is out, doesn't they have a reverse? I'm like, can't they put the fire out and then put the truck in reverse and back up and like leave? And no, we got to be able to drive in and drive out. I mean, these are just little things that at some point we have to try to figure out, because our tenants are feeling it. The construction companies, I'm presuming, are feeling it. I have a statistic there. I'm not going to bother, but I can, the number of like 4,000 people are needed in the construction field in the next several years. These are all issues that I feel we have to address in order to partly figure out some of the economic issues. And Molly and I were talking about CAM costs, and I'd love to hear you fill in on the...
Yeah, I mean, as all of our vendors and all of the sectors have to pay, like you said, more per hour. They're all having to pay more per hour because people can't afford to live on the wages. And so the wages are going up, and the cost has to be recouped somewhere. Like and so our smaller tenants are definitely feeling that. As utility costs go up, as CAM costs go up, it's more expensive, just for plowing, lawn care, all of those things. As all of those companies have to pay higher wages, somebody has to absorb the cost. And it will start impacting our rents at some point. Like, I mean, I don't know about your markets, but if CAM costs keep creeping up really high, it's eventually going to impact what we can get on lease renewal rates, because their costs are going up. Rent can't double, rent can't go up by 5% and your utility costs go up by 10%. It's, these small, and it hurts the local businesses more so than it hurts like a national tenant. But those are the tenants that are keeping all of our neighborhood centers alive. And those are a lot of the tenants that are leasing upper floor office space. So it definitely has a big impact.
I mean, that's our workforce. We look around at these industrial parks, and year over year, next segment in industrial, I mean, these industrial vacancy rates are 2% or lower, but there is no new. There's no one coming in here and building, a development of a 100,000 square foot building. When was the last time you heard of that happening? The buildings that we're turning over or releasing are 70s, 80s, right, 90s. So there's no new industry coming in. And again, if you have a healthy workforce, I think that will in turn obviously draw in larger companies who need larger buildings and have a healthy workforce to pull from.
And it'd be really easy to blame all the bankers and say, well, interest rates are up. Right?
It's not their fault.
No, it's not their fault, but it'd be easy to blame them. And that's, like 6.5%, 7.5%, those are still good rates. For residential mortgages, 7.5%, 8% is not a bad rate for a commercial mortgage.
And it started happening before the rates went up.
Yeah.
The costs were already going up before the rates went up.
And I think, we need to start trying to push to think, from my perspective, outside of the box. One of the things I talked about is, in the 70s, they had crisis, and they created 40-year amortizations for apartment buildings. Seemed pretty simple to me, right? Like, I mean, I'm not saying like I don't know all the things that can take place in Washington or Augusta. I'm not that smart, but it seems like you could tick, amortizations out pretty easily to help create cash flow.
So thinking about Brandon, I know that you roam around the state a lot, because whenever we try to have a conference call or something, we have to figure out where's Brandon.
Where in the world is Brandon?
Yeah, and so anyway, it was always kind of fun. But you and I were talking about the fact that you're a broker who is out there in marketplaces that are not what you reported on, but you're doing a lot of stuff. And that you had some really cool observations about people might like to hear, where you saw some great things happening when you're roaming around.
Yeah, no, I have 3 kids. I gotta, go where the work is. But no, there's we had some great deals, not just in York County, but I sold a self-storage facility in West Gardner. That another one. As soon as that hit the market, that was a hot commodity. I mean, it's just West Gardner, not Gardner, West Gardner. But and further down the road, Booth Bay, I had a 60,000 square foot self-storage facility come available. And it's funny, a group out of Texas bought it, and the guy who owned it lived in Texas, and they actually knew each other. And I was like, well, this is weird, but it's like Maine's on the map. I mean, it's more often than not that we're
discount your commission.
No, I didn't. No, I did. Actually, I did. 3 kids. But no, but also, Oxford Hills, Oxford. I sold 10 acres of developable land up there from a group who owned it out of Las Vegas. Yeah, so there's Raymond. I sold a 120,000 square foot industrial building with 75 industrial acres. So there was business happening all over the state here that, doesn't get really publicized as much as some of the stuff around kind of the Cumberland County area. But yeah, it's been your Maine is on the map. I mean, there's people that I get calls from out of state every day looking at, not just, not even York County, not Cumberland County, but all over the map. I'm sure, Molly, you can probably attest to that too.
Maine is it's not as far north as people think.
Yeah.
People are starting to consider it. I think COVID made people consider Maine more so because it was
Agree.
a safe place to be. I had a lot of, I filled a lot of office space right post-COVID with a lot of people that had moved here. A bunch of people that were just relocated here to get out of wherever they were, get out of city life. I had people renting spaces that were working remote, but they didn't want to work remote from their home. So they packed up, moved to Maine, kept their job that was from California, and rented an office space and live in Maine now.
That's like half my neighborhood.
Right? Like, it happens.
Well, I think, Maine is on the map. And I think one of the interesting things to bear in mind, we don't have national or overly large amount of natural disasters. We have some flooding issues for sure, but, we don't have mudslides. We don't have hurricanes really creeping on us. We don't have, fires like they have in California. We have resources where we have, plenty of water. You can water your lawn. It works. It's okay. High-speed internet in general works pretty well, right? So, Maine has an enormous amount of pros going for it, and we've seen that migrant influx of people for that reason throughout the state.
I think that's, I'm sorry. I think that's part of the reason why we wanted as a panel to just sort of lift everybody's eyes up and think about places in other regions around the state. Give calls to people in the economic development offices, brokers there, brokers here who will go there, whatever it is. But the state's growing, and we're hearing it coming from a lot of directions. We heard it about housing. We've got that going on. And the cost, like Kevin's talking about, it's so expensive, and the CAM costs that Molly's talking about, that you've got workers who can't afford to live there, and you got to pay them more. And the whole thing is just, it's really just a big, expanding horizon. And I think COVID did a lot of what already was happening as people looked around to Maine for retirement homes, et cetera. But I do business in other markets, and I talk to people all the time, and boy, they are just really overrun with interest. There's opportunity out there. So from a regional perspective, we're trying to touch on it just to kind of get you to think about it, because there are a lot of cool places. All the places you mentioned, Brandon, you probably didn't get up in the morning and think, I'm gonna go Booth Bay Harbor and do a deal. But there's an awful lot going on, and there's a lot of sophisticated folks who want to come here and get their hands on stuff. So just saying.
Well, and we have, a good segue. It's almost like you teed that up. But we have a lot of great entertainment venues. We have a lot of great restaurants. And I think, we've got the mountains. I was talking to John Doyon, who lived at Sugarloaf for the last 4 months. But, you get skiing, you get the ocean, and all within, an hour's drive. I think we've got a lot of great things going for us.
Yep. Yeah, waterfront concerts definitely helped round out our entertainment quarter in Bangor and really kind of.
I told you I've got my tickets to Billy Idol.
You're coming north.
Billy Idol,
Right.
Joan Jett. The concerts got me staying in Bangor on a Tuesday night.
It's,
Just saying.
It definitely helped put Bangor on the map and make people realize, gee, maybe I'll drive north to Bangor, right? Like, would you have done that before?
Yeah, I would have, but not, for hockey. For hockey, yes. But Joan Jett, Billy Idol, I would have relived my 80s, man.
You can go.
Coming with you.
Yeah, you can go see a concert and be out of that venue and in your hotel, or I can be back home in 10 minutes.
Wow.
In a venue that holds over 16,000 people, with acts like, I mean, last year they had Luke Bryan, they had Lainey Wilson. I mean, Pitbull came.
Post Malone.
Post Malone. I saw that one. I forgot about that one. Post Malone. Like, I mean, to be able to see that in Bangor, or to be in Portland and only have to drive 2 hours.
Yeah.
And not have to go. I know you can go 2 hours towards Boston, but it's an easy drive. It's an easy. And
I like Bangor over Boston.
All right.
So Molly,
Good.
when you, as a real estate professional, you've watched this unfold. This has been a huge thing in your market. Can you add any more insight about how you see the future of that expansion and that kind of thing? When you get a really quality entertainment thing, then
Yeah, and the entertainment sort of started back when Hollywood Casino was built, and then the Cross Insurance Center, and now Waterfront Concerts. I mean, they're all within like a quarter of a mile of each other. So it's really created kind of a small entertainment corridor, with restaurants and a couple of hotels there. But it's really making people considering coming to Bangor. It's certainly, I think, post-COVID really helped a lot of our restaurants stay alive. I think it's really helping, definitely helping the hospitality industry. Certainly. I mean, on a concert night, there's not a hotel room to be had in Bangor.
yeah. Do you see more development of that kind of thing spinning off from this? I do think. Is there room in that area for that, or would it be another area?
It could be in that area. Yeah, there's definitely room in that area. There's definitely room for growth, especially if, when Cross Insurance Center has a conference or an event and there's something at the waterfront. There's almost not enough hotel rooms in Bangor to support that. Like, I mean, the rates that they are getting at these hotels, even on a non-concert night, is vastly different than what it would have been 5 years ago.
That supports something when Tom Barton and I were talking about what's going on as you're doing all this infrastructure building, you know where you're going with it, and the people that are coming in. He's got at least one hotel looking, and he's got another one that's considering it. So you see what a catalyst it is, and things don't always have to be a very huge thing in a regional, smaller marketplace that actually can grow and become a larger thing in a multi-dimensional kind of different commercial development type. So again, just trying to stimulate some thinking here. So anybody else got anything to say outside of buying concert tickets?
Buy houses.
Why don't you talk for a minute? I know that you know so darn much. You've forgotten more about selling houses and all than anybody in the room here. So from there, I'm just wondering, you are with a company that's all over the state. So you are traveling around all the time and getting a lot of data. What can you just off the top of your head tell us about that?
Yeah, so Keller Williams, we've got 500 agents scattered from York to Presque Isle, and 6 service centers. I'm an advocate for housing. If anybody has not heard me get on a soapbox talking about the power of buying single-family homes, buy me coffee. I will chat. I'm actually buying another house tomorrow. You can't build a house for $450,000, $500,000 new construction. And so if you can buy a decent quality workforce housing, 3-bedroom, 1-bath house in the $250 to $300 range, that math works from my perspective. It would work better on a 30-year mortgage. If any lenders would give that, 40 would be better, right? But everybody always needs a place to live. As a person who lost a lot of money in 2008 to 2012, they don't always need office space. They don't always need retail space, but they always need a place to live. So I'm obviously an advocate for housing as an investment, but at some point we've got to figure out the ability for somebody in their 20s or 30s to be able to buy a house and not have to save and, live with their parents, and not buy a house until they're 40. I mean, at some point we've got to figure this out. It's probably a little bit above my pay grade, but at some point, and there are plenty of houses out there that I think are great investments, and the math works.
Well, I mean, there's, it all kind of correlates together. I mean, residential real estate, commercial real estate. I mean, found myself doing a lot of self-storage deals. And, when I'm looking for a new deal for, a large national client, we're not looking in Portland. We're not looking in, the really high density areas. We're looking for the outliers. Right. We're looking for the Waterboroughs. We're looking for Elliott, Gardeners. You know what I mean? We're kind of those growth areas that they're still accessible to kind of where a lot of the job centers are, but you're within like an hour range. Gardner, that's a great example. I mean, you can work at Bath Iron Works and live in Gardner. You can drive to Portland. It's an hour. It's an easy hour. So, yeah, I think, I know, they all kind of work together hand in hand.
Yeah.
I'm going to break this off with these folks now so that you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. If you have interest in asking a question, please proceed to the one of the two microphones closest to you. And basically, we ask that you ask your question succinctly, not a long intro, spreading out a lot of detail. And I want you to know this came to me from the bosses above. So don't hold that against me. But in any event, please do come up. So we're going to take some time here. Questions from the panelists. Love to hear from you. And the microphones are right over here. We ask you to speak into them directly so that people in the room will hear you. And you'll be recorded also, so it's on the website.
There we go. Yes, my question relates to the 84,000 units, the deficit of housing. Are you seeing any evidence of like your big out-of-state firms like Toll Brothers or even like an Avalon Bay or anyone moving into Maine and being able to leverage their economies of scale and access to capital markets and stuff? Any evidence of that going on yet?
Not in the single-family market, but we are seeing an out-of-state development specifically on the apartment side. But not in single-family home construction, which I don't know if we could build a community large enough for them to get the economy of scale. Maybe we could. But yes, on the apartments, no on the single families.
That's a good point, though.
Yeah, it is a good point. But again, I think we come out of this by creating the opportunity for smaller developers. I think if we think we're going to 200 or 300 unit develop our way out of this, or 100, 150 lot subdivision our way out of this, I think we're looking at it wrong. I think it's infill of being able to put 36 units on 2 acres and employing the opportunity for somebody that can pull off a $4 or $5 million project instead of a $40 or $50 million project.
Thank you.
Hi, Bill Welch from Bernstein Shore. I didn't hear any discussion about what's happening with, say, the Bangor Mall, the Main Mall, other big box facilities. We hear all the gloom and doom about retail. Maybe you could speak about that a little bit as to reuse or, what's happening with those types of properties.
Yeah, I think that was the retail breakout session.
Right.
I believe the Main Mall owner is speaking today, actually.
Okay.
Yes, the main mall definitely looks different than the Bangor Mall. We don't track data inside of the Bangor Mall because that is sort of its own retail hub in and of itself. But the area surrounding the actual mall itself in Bangor is doing really well. We don't have large-scale vacancies. I mean, we have one box that's vacant maybe. But other than that, there is only a couple of sort of inline spaces that are vacant. There really are no large-scale vacancies surrounding the Bangor Mall area. So despite what's happening inside the mall, that's why I purposely worded it as the Stillwater-Hogan area, not the Bangor Mall area, just to sort of differentiate between the two, because it used to be sort of called the Bangor Mall area, but it's really... the area surrounding it is really its own retail hub, and it's doing really well. I mean, there are still people looking for space out in that area that want to be in a strip mall or inline, and they're not able to find what they're looking for. So that area is healthy despite sort of what has hit the news about the Bangor Mall itself. And the main mall seems to still be a retail mall, like a retail hub.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not expert on it at all, but again, from just living down here too, I mean, and it's always, there's turnover, yes, but there always seems to be, you know, a home for a lot of these smaller infills, but the bigger box ones, I'm kind of, I've heard some rumblings that one has sold, I believe Sears, but again, I don't know. I don't want to get too crazy down the line here, but I do know in Bangor that group who did the climate control multi-story in one of the big boxes there beat me to the punch, so I was still a little sour about that one. But
Oh, is that the one across the street?
yeah.
They tore down the Circuit City. Is that the one?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a bit. That was a big.
I was so close on
build.
that one, but
Yep.
And if you care about the Auburn Mall, that's doing. I'll echo the Bangor area, right? The other areas around the Auburn Mall is doing really well.
Right? Like, yeah. It's right. Yeah. It's not a problem in the whole area. It's just specific to one property.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions here? We are getting to the place where we can wrap up, but if anyone has a last question here and wants to wander up to the mic, love to hear it.
Karen Rich?
Okay, well, with that, I want to thank my fellow folks here in the brokerage realm who are trying to get some thoughts out to maybe spread some thinking beyond their markets and also for their expert analysis of their own markets. So happy to have them as panelists. And I want to mention to you folks, again, you can get this information just like you can on the other topics that are being presented online. And I want to also mention that, as you know, you've got a new segment coming up wherever you're going to be going to, and you've got about a bit of a 10-minute between here and there. And the locations include municipal trends are in room A, the industrial outlook is in room B, and the construction outlook is in room C, which is right here. So again, thanks for attending and enjoy the afternoon.
Thank you for having us.